back, CIS 130. This is script 23, reading from and printing information that we find in a file. This is a follow-up on script 22 and also one of a 5-part series on opening and closing files. I'll remind you that you do have a code starter file, codestarter.txt. This file is available for you to download. It's in the lecture notes. If you go to the home page, you'll find that if you scroll down in the lecture, you're going to find that the go down to the bottom of this one. Since it's the end of the semester, I put it at the very bottom, Code Starter, for scripts 22, 23, 24, 25. And so we handled 22 last time, and actually we almost finished it. And we had one more thing to do, is inside of the subroutine named write data, to write three strings. These 3 strings. We did not write these 3 strings to the file, so let me pick up from there, and then we did close the file properly. So what I'm going to do is I'll jump back over here. This was our script 22, and I'll finish it at this point. Instead of just having one thing being written to the file, it was asking us to actually write 3 times. And so I'm going to take this write number 1, I'm going to put it right here in front of open a file, I'm going to add a comma there. I'm going to paste it again and put a comma there. Okay, and I'm going to paste it again, put another comma there, right? So what happens here at this point is that I am writing to this file 3 times. Write number 1, write number 1, write number 1. And you would rightfully say, what is number 1? We have this number 1 up here as a variable. It's a special kind of variable for us. It's a file handle variable. And so we can name it, what we conventionally name it is a pound sign, or what is that, a hash mark, and then an integer. And we can have this go as high as we want. And we can use it, and we can reuse the file handle variable if we want to. For clarity, we tend to not reuse it. We'll just spin another one, number 2, number 3, number 4. But every time we have a file handle variable open, we also have to close it. And that's what this line down here is doing, close number 1. So we can use that file handle as many times as we want. It's just another variable for us, and we use it to handle, in this case, a write. In script 23, what we're asked to do instead of doing a write is we're asked to do a read. And so in this case, what we want to do is we would like to read the information out of the file until we can't find any more information in there anymore at all. So, in this case, we have the same basic setup, and we saw this before. We saw an algorithm, is what we call it, for handling files. Every file call has to have an open, some sort of manipulate, and then a close structure in order to do this right. So within this text file again, I actually am going to jump in here and say this. That's append, and so we can find this one. We can read right here. So this is finding information. I'm going to copy this and bringing it into a script file for reading what's in there. Now I'm going to cheat a little bit. It's my code anyway, so I'm going to make this be script 23, and what I'm going to do in here is that I'm going to suggest that I already saved this one file called script 22. I saved it at the end of script 22 video, but I never looked at it. It was empty, and so in theory there is something saved in there because I wrote this data in there, and if I didn't write it in there, I'll run it right now and I'll go ahead and write that data right inside of there. I get a black screen. This is the old file that I used. I had it done at the end just to see that I was in there. But at this point, what I'm wanting to do is not write data, so I can comment out this one here. But what I want is to read data. Okay, and now you know we have this thing called read data, right? This special function called read data. So what I'm going to do is I'll rename this. I'll call it read info on here, and because our subroutines, it doesn't matter where they're listed, I can create a new subroutine called read info right here, right at the top. I don't even need to scroll around. I'm going to paste in what I found in that text file in here, because this gives me the option to read. Now what I want, I'm going to do an open still, I'm going to do a close still, but I'm going to do a read instead of a write here. So this read is going to be right here. And look at this. Open get file for input as 2. So there's my open statement. I know that's going to go in open. line input number 2, and then found this text, right? So what I'm looking at here is this. Line is each line in the text file. Whatever line is read, I can read these text files line by line. I can read them character by character. I can read them for size of data or size of data, and I can consume them as a single pass called a blob. So in this case, what I'm doing is I'm reading each line. It's like saying for each line, read the line and do something. In this case, it's just reading one line because it's a single line call. I'm not inside of a for loop here or inside of another loop. I'm input, that's what's coming into me. So I'm grabbing this information. It's coming into me. Remember the input statement we used before when we were asking a user to prompting a user? So same thing goes. All we're doing is saying input, and we're saying, what are we going to input? We're going to input into this variable right here, which is a file handle for number 2, and this is the variable then that we hold this into. It's called found this text, and I could make it be anything I want, right? So I could say line input, right? So that's the new variable on this, and what happens is that down here I'm going to print whatever I found, some just a very boilerplate text found in, I'll say in get file, right? So this is the text found in get file. Line input, this is this variable. I just put it in there by reading a line and using the input command on this file handle to get it in there, right? So I'm reading this, and for this particular function right here, which is read info, the only part of this I need in here is that. Okay, and well, actually, I guess I can do it like this. I can make like that. Close and open, these two functions do not belong up here in read info. They belong down here in open file. Okay, and so at this point, I'm going to leave my file string right there. Script 22 is the one I want to go read, and this is okay. It's going to be called my file, and I'm going to go ahead and update these as I go through. I'm going to open. Of course, it's not get file anymore, but my file for input is number 2. Okay, input. I'm reading stuff from the file, and that's what I want. Number 2, right? This is my file handle, and I have to tell it where I'm reading and writing these files from. Down here, I'm going to take my close. I can get rid of the output one. That one's no longer there. I'm going to leave the write data alone. I'm just simply not going to call it. And here I'm going to close number 2. Okay, and then what I'll do is I'll comment this guy out too. Okay, now when I read this, what's going to happen is the only thing I'm going to see on the screen is this right here, open a file, because it's the first line that was written into that file when I had this script set up to write a file instead of read a file. But in this case, I have not called write data, so I'm not conning anything else that I want in there, and here it is, open a file. That's exactly what I had. Now keep in mind, I printed out text found in get file, right? So I did actually add that to that, but this is what I expected to be able to read, was a single line. I know that there's 3 lines in this file, 1, 2, and 3, but I only printed the 1 line out. Script 23 asks you to read until EOF is found. Okay, so that means that you're not just reading 1, and you don't know how many lines are in that file. It could be 3, it could be 3,000, right? So what we want is we want an EOF on here. So what we're going to do is this. Instead of, sorry, not there, we'll go back up here to this one. Okay, up here, what we want to do is we want these 2 lines to be inside of a statement that says do while it's not end of file. And again, to help you out a little bit with this, I do give you this in the code behind file over here. I do show you what the syntax is on this, and it's just like this. I'm going to copy this, I'll go back in here, and so I don't need these 2 lines in the center, but I do need this one here and this one here. Okay, so now look at what's happening here. I have a do loop, and you've seen these a bunch of times. Remember, there's 4 of them. I hold my hand up. 2 until loops, one that's early evaluation, one that's late evaluation, and 2 while loops, one that's early evaluation and one that's late evaluation. All we're doing at this point is saying do until end of file. Here, if you notice on here, this number's in here. 2 is what we want. That's our file handle is 2. Now I don't have to tell it #2. In this case, BASIC is going to figure out that this one needs a integer, and this is actually this is a file integer handle. So this is the way that we're going to run this, is that 2. Let's see now. This actually turned out to be unnecessary in here. So I'm just going to print whatever my line output is, and I'm going to forego. Actually, I will print done, but I'm going to print another blank line underneath it, and I'm going to go ahead and run it. It should print open a file, read or write data, close the file. And there we go. So that's what we get with these 3. Keep in mind, what we're doing here is we have, up here, we're using a loop. The other way that we could have gotten this out of here is that we could have taken this right here, this one line, and we could have just used it 1, 2, 3 times, right? And we could have just done something like that and printing each one out. So it is possible to do that. So let's just try something, because wouldn't we love it if it were if it just worked like that, right? So let's do this. Let's find out if we can consolidate that function call into what we call a lambda. It looks like it's not going to run because it's not indenting for me. But here's what we would normally do. If we were in another programming language, we would take that, this code and we would call it. So we would call one function inside of another function is how we would do it. Now, I don't think that the parentheses on here are going to help this, but let's see if we can run a lambda using BASIC. Name already in use on current line, yeah, so it won't let us do this right here with the print on there, so it forces us to go out there. But as you progress through in your work in computer science, you're going to find that lambdas are actually quite helpful, and they can make your code somewhat more, let's say, elegant, and potentially also more efficient. So this should do it for the script 23. I'll do 24 and 25 along with this series. My recommendation, get them all done at once and you'll be in good form. Thanks.